The first scream came at 11 minutes past midnight, and I knew before I turned my head that it was a fake one. I have heard real screams on this post, the kind that come out of a person before they decide to make them, and they do not have a wind-up. This one had a wind-up. It started low, climbed a careful ladder of notes, and broke at the top with a flourish, the way a man practices in a mirror until he likes the sound of his own fear. I was standing the inner sentry box of the Sallow Gate, the small north entrance of the Hartreeve Court, and the man making that noise was 40 feet away with a light strapped to his forehead, and a camera held out in front of him like a torch he meant to ward us off with. Beside me, eyes front under the brim of his bearskin, Trooper Westmarsh did not so much as breathe wrong. That is the thing people never understand about us, so let me say it plainly before the rest. The stillness you see is not emptiness. Behind that face, a man is reading the whole street. I was reading it. I had clocked the streamer the moment he came around the corner of Carradine Lane, because men who carry that much equipment at midnight are either lost or working, and this one was working. "Did you hear that?" he said to his camera, not to us, his voice pitched for an audience that was not on the street. "Did you hear that? Something's here with us tonight. Something does not want us at this gate. I will tell you who I am, because this is my account and the inquiry has my name on it anyway. Lance Corporal Adrian Quell, 11 years on the King's Guard, the last 4 of them on the night details at Hartreeve. Westmarsh had 3 years and a steadier hand than men twice his service. The Sallow Gate is the quiet one. The grand changing happens at the South Forecourt where the tourists gather. The Sallow Gate is a working door, deliveries by day, a pair of sentries by night, an iron grill, a lamp on a bracket that throws a long cone of yellow onto the cobbles. By midnight the lane is empty. That emptiness is exactly what the streamer had come for. He called himself, I would learn within the hour, the Hartreeve Haunting, and he had been promising his followers for a week that he would prove the old North Gate was cursed. He had a theory ready-made and a story to sell. A guardsman who had died on this post a century ago, a cold spot, a shape in the lamplight. None of it was true. What was true was that he had 30,000 people watching a little glowing rectangle in his hand, and he had decided that the surest way to give them a show was to make one of us flinch. "Watch the guards," he told them, creeping closer along the iron railing, his light swinging across the cobbles. "They're not allowed to react. That's the rule. So if something gets a reaction out of one, that's how you know it's real. That's how you know there's something here that even they can feel. I want you to hear the logic in that because it is the rotten heart of the whole night. He had decided in advance that our discipline was a measuring instrument for his ghost. If we held, the gate was merely guarded. If we broke, the gate was haunted. There was no version of the evening in which 2 soldiers simply did their jobs and he went home. He needed a flinch, and he had come equipped to manufacture one. He started small. He stood at the edge of the lamplight where the camera could frame both of us, and he began to talk to the dark behind us in a low, theatrical hush. "Is there someone here?" Knock once for yes. Then a long pause and a knock, his own knuckle on the iron railing, a sound he clearly believed we could not place. Westmarsh's eyes did not move. Mine did not move. The lamp hissed. Somewhere across the court a clock I have heard 1,000 nights ticked toward the quarter hour. When the knocking did nothing, he escalated. He produced from a pouch on his chest rig a small speaker, and he played through it the sound of a child crying, thin, distant, looped. I have to tell you that this one tested me. Not because I believed it. I knew within a half-second it was a recording, the loop point audible if you have ears, the tininess of it wrong for the open air. But the body does not always wait for the mind. The body hears a child crying and leans toward it before you can give it an order. I felt that lean start in my chest and I shut it down, and I kept my eyes on the middle distance, and I let him play his little ghost until he tired of it. "Nothing," he muttered, and for the first time the showman's gloss slipped and I heard the man underneath, irritated, calculating. 30,000 people do not stay for nothing. He looked at his own numbers in the corner of his screen, and I watched a decision cross his face. He was going to stop knocking on railings. He was going to come through the lamplight and put his ghost where it could not be ignored. "Okay," he said, bright again, the performance back on. "Okay, they want proof, so we're going to do something nobody's done. We're going to bring the haunting to them." He crossed the cone of lamplight at a half crouch, and now he was inside the line, not the legal line, not yet, but the line a man learns on this post, the radius where a stranger's hands become your whole world. He stopped 3 feet from Westmarsh. He thrust the camera up into the young trooper's face, the headlamp glaring white off the polished peak and the brass, and he screamed. This was the wind-up scream's bigger brother. Full-throated, 6 inches from a man's ear, a scream engineered to do to the nervous system what a slammed door does to jump the body before the mind can hold it. I have trained for years against exactly this, and I will confess the muscles in my own jaw tightened. Westmarsh did not move. Not the eyes, not the chin, not the rifle. He stood as if the scream had happened in another country. I was proud of him in that second, and I was also afraid because I knew what came next. I had seen this shape of evening before, just never dressed as a ghost. A man who has decided you must react and finds you will not, does not give up and go home. He climbs. Each rung of provocation that fails becomes the floor he stands on to reach the next. The knock had failed. The recording had failed. The scream had failed. There was only one direction left for a man like that to go, and it was toward our hands. He stepped back, breathing hard, and grinned at his camera. "Did you see that? Did you see that?" He didn't move. He didn't move because he can't or because he's too scared to. We're going to find out which. He reached again into the rig on his chest, and his hand came out with something I could not name at first in the yellow light, a small bottle, dark, with a nozzle. He shook it the way a man shakes a can of paint. "They say," he said to the dark, to the camera, to the 30,000, "that the guard who died here bled out on these stones. They say the stones still remember." He thumbed the nozzle, and a thick red ran down over his own hand, and he flung the rest of it across the front of Westmarsh's tunic in a wide, dripping arc. It struck the red wool and ran. In the lamplight it looked, for one ugly heartbeat, exactly like what he wanted it to look like, a man bleeding from the chest, standing upright as if he did not yet know he was hit. I heard the gasp come tinny out of the chest speaker, his audience reacting, and I heard the streamer laugh, a high, delighted sound, because he had finally made an image worth 30,000 pairs of eyes. I knew within the half-second what it was. Stage blood. Corn syrup and dye, the same stuff you can buy in a costume shop in October, too bright and too even to be the real thing, and it carried a faint sweet smell under the lamp that no wound ever carried. But I want to be exact about what went through me, because the inquiry asked and I told them, and I will tell you the same. It was not the trick that moved me. It was the desecration of the tunic. You may think that is a small thing to a man, a stain on a coat. It is not a small thing. That coat is not Westmarsh's. It belongs to the post, and the post is older than both of us, and 100 men have stood the sallow gate in that same red and handed it on clean. We do not wear it to be looked at. We wear it to say a thing without speaking, that there is a standard here that does not bend for weather or boredom or an audience. To fling a fistful of fake gore across it for entertainment is to spit on every one of those 100 men. Westmarsh felt that. I saw the cost of his stillness move once across his eyes and settle. He held. God, he held. "Look at him," the streamer breathed, circling now, getting his angle, the red dripping off the brass buttons onto the cobbles. "He's covered in it and he won't even look down. That's not normal. That's not human. Something is holding these men in place." Here is where a lesser sentry or a lesser pair loses the night. The instinct when a man defiles your uniform and laughs is to make him stop, to shove the camera down, to put a glove on his chest and walk him backward off the lamplight. Every fiber of an honest man wants it. And it is exactly the wrong move, because the moment a guardsman lays the first hand on, The footage tells a story with the guard as the aggressor and the streamer as the victim. And 30,000 people who have already been told we are not allowed to react will watch us prove them right by reacting. The discipline is not for show. The discipline is the trap closing slowly around the man who keeps reaching into it. So I did the thing the post requires, which is the thing that looks like nothing. I let my eyes pass once, deliberately, across the streamer's face, long enough that he saw it, long enough that for a half-second his grin faltered, because a thing he had decided could not look back had just looked at him. And then I returned my gaze to the middle distance, and I keyed the small transmitter at my collar with the side of my jaw, 2 short presses, the signal for the guardroom that we had a situation at the Sallow Gate that was not yet an emergency but was no longer routine. In the guardroom 40 yards behind us, Sergeant Bram Holloway would have looked up from his desk at 2 soft tones, checked the gate camera, and seen a man in a headlamp throwing red liquid on one of his sentries. I did not have to explain. Holloway has 30 years. He knows the difference between a drunk who needs walking home and a man building towards something, and he knows that the worst thing the guardroom can do is come boiling out the door and give the camera its fight. He would come, but he would come slow and lawful, and he would bring witnesses. There is a thing I have learned over 11 years that I do not think a man can be told. He has to stand it. It is that the hardest provocation to bear is never the loud one. The scream, the blood, the shove, those summon the body's anger, and anger is a fuel you can ride. The hardest is the patient, grinning, certain disrespect of a man who has decided in advance that you are not a person but a fixture, and who narrates you to a crowd as though you cannot hear. The streamer kept doing that. He kept saying he to the camera while looking at us, kept calling Westmarsh it, kept treating 2 living men as a haunted prop in his show. That is the provocation that gets in under the armor because it does not ask you to fight. It asks you to disappear, to agree that you are only a costume. And the discipline answers it the only way discipline can, by being so completely, so deliberately present behind the stillness that the stillness itself becomes a refusal. We were not absent. We were the most awake men on that lane. He simply could not see it, and his blindness was the whole of his coming undoing. I watched Westmarsh through the side of my vision, and I saw him do the work. A younger man's stillness is a held breath, an older man's is a settled wait. Westmarsh had only 3 years, but he stood like the weight, and I knew then that he would not break, because the men who break are the ones still fighting the urge to move. Westmarsh had set the urge down. He was not enduring the streamer. He had simply removed himself in the way that matters from the streamer's reach, present in body, unreachable in the place the man was actually aiming for. You cannot drag a flinch out of a man who has stopped offering one. The streamer did not know any of this. He saw 2 statues and a stain and a number in the corner of his screen that was climbing now, and the climbing number is a drug. I have come to understand that it is the climbing number that did the real provoking, more than any belief in ghosts. He had tasted what worked. The blood had worked. The audience had surged. And so the logic that had governed the whole night tightened its last turn. If a stain on the coat brought that, what would a real reaction bring? "They're not gonna give us anything standing here," he said, and the showman's voice had a new edge to it. The edge of a man who has stopped pretending even to himself that this is about a ghost. "We have to push it. We have to make contact. If there's a presence holding this man, we break the hold, we make him move." He looked straight into his own lens. "I'm going to touch the guard. I know, but this is for science. This is for all of you who have been told these men can't be reached. Watch what happens when something reaches them." I felt the night change gears under my boots. There is a moment on this post where the air itself seems to lean in, and an old sentry learns to feel it the way a farmer feels rain coming. The crying recording, the scream, the blood, all of that had been on his side of an invisible wall. A man is allowed, more's the pity, to stand on a public lane and shout and play recordings and look a fool. The law gives him a great deal of rope. But the law draws one bright line, and it draws it at our skin. The instant his hand closed on a guardsman, the whole legal shape of the night would flip, and he was telling 30,000 people, on camera in his own voice, that he was about to cross it on purpose. "Westmarsh," I said. I said it low, barely a breath, my lips not moving, the way you learn to pass a word down a still line. "He's coming to grab, hold the rifle, don't strike, let him do it to himself." "Holding," Westmarsh breathed back, and I have never been prouder of a single word. The streamer set his camera into a little clip on his chest rig, so the lens pointed forward, freeing both his hands, and that detail told me everything about his intent. A man who frees both hands at midnight in front of an armed sentry has decided to use them. He flexed his fingers. He glanced, just once, over his shoulder down the empty lane, checking, I think now, that no one with authority was watching, not knowing that authority had already seen and was already walking. And he stepped over the line a man learns on this post, into the radius where a stranger's hands become your whole world. "Last chance, spirits," he said, grinning, sweat on his lip, the headlamp blazing. "Show me you're real." And then he reached up with both hands and seized the front of Westmarsh's tunic, the wet red of his own prank smearing across his knuckles, and he hauled a hard, jerking, downward yank, meant to drag a KingsGuard out of his stillness and into the frame. Westmarsh did not get dragged, but he did not strike either, and I want to dwell on the difference because the whole verdict of the night turned on it. A man being hauled by the chest has every excuse to swing. The streamer's hands were on him, his weight was on him. A court would forgive a soldier who put that man on the cobbles, but Westmarsh did the harder thing and the cleaner thing. He set his stance, one boot back, the weight low, the way we are drilled until it is older than thought, and he simply did not move. The yank that should have folded him met a man built into the ground, and it was the streamer who staggered, his own pull rebounding on him because there was nothing at the other end of it to give. And in the same motion, Westmarsh executed the one action the post permits and the moment demanded. He brought his rifle up and across, the drill of present arms turned to a barrier, the flat of it between his body and the grasping hands, so that any further pull closed not on a man but on a wall of wood and steel held by a man who would not yield it. He did not jab. He did not swing. He raised a shield and held it, eyes still forward, and let the streamer's own force do to the streamer what a thrown punch never could have. Make him the only person on that lane who was off balance, off his feet, and visibly, undeniably, the one who had laid hands first. The rifle coming up made a sound. On the night details we are trained to bring the piece to the present sharply, and a sharp present arms at the sallow gate trips a contact on the bracket above the grill, a relic of an old protocol, a sentry's silent call that flashes a lamp in the guardroom. So at the very instant the streamer grabbed him, three things happened that he had no way to see. The gate lamp above us pulsed twice, Holloway's slow walk became a quick one, and the night relief, two more troopers and the corporal of the watch, came out of the guardroom door in good order, not running, never running, but moving with the particular unhurried speed of men who have been told exactly what they will find. The streamer felt the rifle and let go as if the wood had burned him. He stumbled back 2 steps into the full cone of the lamp, and the showman's face was gone entirely now. What stood there was a frightened young man who had just understood, a beat too late, that the statue could carry consequences. "Whoa, whoa, okay," he moved, he said, and the words came out tangled, half to his camera and half to himself. "He moved, he touched me, you all saw it, he came at me with the gun." "He did not," I said. It was the first full sentence either of us had spoken aloud, and I said it flat and level and loud enough to be on his recording, because I had decided some seconds earlier that the record of this night was going to be set straight in real time and not left to be edited. "You took hold of him. He raised his weapon to the guard position and held it there. He has not struck you and he will not. Step back from the gate." "You're not allowed to talk to me," he said, which is the kind of thing a man says when the floor has tilted and he is reaching for any rule that might tilt it back. You're not allowed to. That was Holloway, arriving at my shoulder, and the streamer's head snapped toward him. The sergeant did not raise his voice. He never does. He had his peaked cap squared and his hands clasped behind him and 30 years in the set of his jaw, and behind him the night relief had quietly arranged themselves so that the lamplight, the gate, and the streamer were all inside a loose half-circle of red coats. I am the sergeant of this guard. You have laid hands on a sentry of the King's Guard on his post. The constabulary have been called and are on their way. You will remain where you are. It's a haunting, the streamer said, and even he heard how thin it sounded in the open air, with 5 sober soldiers looking at him and the corn syrup smell of his own blood rising off the cobbles. I was its content, it's a bit, it's not. He stopped. He looked down at the bottle still in his hand, the nozzle, the dye on his fingers, and I watched him try to make it disappear back into his rig and fail, because Holloway said without any heat at all, "Leave that in your hand, please. The constables will want to see it." That was the hinge of the whole night, that small instruction. Leave that in your hand. Because the streamer's entire defense, the one he would reach for within the hour and the one his followers would shout for days, was that something real had happened, a ghost, a presence, a thing that made the guard break, and that he was the victim of a soldier who had snapped. And the single thing that demolished that defense before it could stand was the object in his own fist. A man does not carry a bottle of stage blood to a real haunting. He carries it to a staged one. The prop he had brought to manufacture his ghost was, in the end, the plain physical proof that there had never been a ghost at all, that every scream and knock and crying recording had been brought there in a pouch, by him, on purpose. I should say here what I have left out, because the inquiry valued it and you should know it too. There had been witnesses the whole time who were not us. The sallow gate is quiet, but it is not blind. A pair of late workers from the court kitchens had come up Carradine Lane behind the streamer some minutes earlier, on their way to the night bus, and they had stopped at the corner, the way people do, when they saw a man in a headlamp shouting at the guards. They had watched the recording, the scream, the blood, and the grab from 40 feet back, sober and uninvolved and entirely outside his camera's frame. One of them, a woman named Mara Dell, whose name is in the file, had taken out her own phone not to make content but because, as she told the constables, "I thought someone might need to prove what that man was doing." She filmed the grab from the side, from the angle his own forward-facing lens could never capture. His 2 hands closing on the tunic, his weight thrown back into the yank, the rifle coming up only after he had holed. 2 strangers, standing in the dark, who owed us nothing, had quietly become the truth of the night. And there was the lamp camera, the plain fixed eye above the grill that we forget is even there, which had recorded the whole approach in its flat, unflattering, time-stamped way. No music, no narration, no breathless whisper about presences, just a man crossing a public lane to lay hands on a sentry. The streamer did not know about Mara Dell. He did not know about the lamp camera. He thought the only record of the night was the one strapped to his own chest, the one he could edit. So he kept performing even now, kept saying, "You all saw it," to an audience that was, in fact, watching him slowly understand that the night had several authors and he was only one of them. The constables came up Carradine Lane 2 minutes later, an older sergeant and a young one, walking, no lights, because Holloway's call had told them precisely what this was and was not. The streamer's whole posture changed at the sight of the uniforms. Not ours, theirs, the kind a court does not forgive him for ignoring. He started talking before they reached him, which is always a mistake, the words tumbling. That he was a creator, that he had permission, that the guard had assaulted him, that he wanted to file a complaint, that he had it all on camera. The older constable, a broad, calm man, let him run out of road the way you let a kettle finish. "You're recording now?" the constable asked when the streamer paused for breath. "Live," the streamer said, with a flicker of the old pride. 31,000 people are watching this right now. Then 31,000 people have just heard you say you took hold of this gentleman by his coat, the constable said, nodding at Westmarsh, and that you came here intending to make physical contact with him to provoke a reaction. We heard you say it ourselves coming up the lane." He looked at the bottle in the streamer's hand without reaching for it. "Is that what's on the soldier's tunic?" The streamer looked at the bottle. He looked at the red across Westmarsh's chest, dulling now as it dried, the sweet smell of it unmistakable to anyone within arm's reach. He looked at the lamp camera, which he was only now noticing, the little fixed eye that had watched everything and could not be edited. And I watched the structure of his evening collapse in his face. There was no ghost to hide behind. There was no flinch he had won. The guard had never flinched. There were only his own two hands, on a recording he could not now claim was the only one, closing on a soldier in front of sober witnesses and a fixed camera, and now the law. It's a prop," he said very quietly, and that was the truest sentence he had spoken all night. "It's stage blood. It's not. Nobody was supposed to." "Set the camera and the bottle down on the cobbles, please," the older constable said, "and put your hands where I can see them." He was arrested at the Sallow Gate at 23 minutes past midnight for assault on the person of a sentry with the elements of it, the intent, the act, the contact, the lack of any provocation by the soldier, recorded from 4 separate angles, only one of which was his. The young constable read it to him plainly. They did not rough him. They did not need to. They walked him to the corner of Carradine Lane, where the car had quietly pulled up, and the headlamp was still strapped to his forehead, throwing its little white cone uselessly at the cobbles. And at some point in those 40 feet, the live stream cut out. Whether he killed it or his hands shook too much to manage it, I never learned. And the 31,000 were left staring at a frozen frame of a man being walked away by police, with a smear of his own fake blood on his knuckles, and the immovable red wall of the gate behind him, exactly as still as it had been before he arrived. We did not watch him go. That is not pride, it is the post. Westmarsh and I came back to attention, eyes front, and the night relief peeled away to their places, and Holloway gave the gate one long look and said only, "Quell." Westmarsh well stood, which from Holloway is the equivalent of a medal, and went back to his desk to begin the paperwork that would matter more than any of us yet knew. The lamp hissed. The clock across the court ticked on toward 1. The lane was empty again, as if nothing had happened, which is the strangest part of this work, that the most disordered moments of a night close over like water and leave the surface flat. But I was not flat, and I will be honest about it. Standing there in the afterquiet with the smell of corn syrup fading off the wool beside me, I felt the cost of the held stillness arrive all at once, the way it always does, late, like a bill. My hands wanted to shake, and I would not let them. I thought about the lean I had felt in my chest at the crying recording, the body leaning toward a suffering it had been told to ignore, and I thought about Westmarsh taking that scream 6 inches from his ear without a flicker, and the blood across the coat that belongs to the post and not to him, and the yank meant to drag him out of 100 years of standing. He had given the man nothing. That is the whole art of it. Not to win the fight, but to deny that there was ever a fight to win, to be so completely a wall that the only violence on the record is the violence the other man brought and spent on himself. "You all right?" I murmured to him when the relief was gone and it was only the two of us and the lamp. "Coat's ruined," Westmarsh said after a moment, and there was the smallest dry thread of something in it, the closest a man on post comes to a joke. "Sergeant's going to make me account for it." "You account for it by telling the truth," I said. "A man threw it on you, you stood. The account writes itself." That, it turned out, was almost exactly what happened, though not in the way I imagined. By morning, the streamer's people, there is always a people, a manager, a forum, a tide of accounts, were doing what I had known they would do, which was to take the only footage they had, his forward-facing lens, and cut it into the story he had wanted to tell all along. The brave investigator, the haunted gate, the guard who snapped and came at him with a rifle. They cut it tight, right at the rifle's rise, ending before the constables, ending before the bottle, ending before any voice could say the word prop. They put grim music under it. By the time I woke for the day relief, it had been watched 1,000,000 times, and the comments were exactly what you would expect. That we were brutes hiding behind a costume, that the gate was cursed, that the poor creator had been attacked for asking questions. I will tell you honestly that there was a bad hour, around midday, when it looked as though the lie would simply win by being louder. 1,000,000 people had seen the cut version. A few hundred had heard the truth. That is the arithmetic that frightens men of my trade now in a way it never used to, that a sentry can do everything exactly right and still be hanged in a frame he was never shown. I sat in the guardroom and watched the number climb on a thing that was not true, and for a moment the held stillness of the night before felt like it had been for nothing. It was not for nothing, and the reason it was not is the reason I have written all of this down, because it is the part the streamer never understood and the part I most want a man reading this to carry away. The truth, when it has been gathered carefully and lawfully and by more hands than one, does not need to shout. It only needs to arrive. It arrived in pieces over the following 2 days, and each piece was something the streamer himself had handed to it. The constabulary released, in their flat official way, the fact of the arrest and the charge, assault on a sentry, which is not a thing they invent. Mara Dell, the kitchen worker who had filmed from the corner, gave her side footage to the police, and then of her own accord posted it plainly with no music and no narration, captioned only with what she had seen. A man crossing the lane, the bottle, the grab, the rifle rising only after his hands were on the soldier. Her angle showed everything his could not. Side by side with his tight little edit, it was not even an argument. It was a man's own missing seconds, restored, and they said the opposite of what he had claimed. And then there was the bottle, the police had it. Stage Blood, a costume brand, bought it, emerged in bulk by the man himself for previous investigations, a fact that turned his ghost into a recurring purchase. A haunting does not have a receipt. His did. The same audience that had thrilled to the blood the night before now had to reckon with the invoice for it, and an audience that feels it has been made a fool of is the most unforgiving audience there is. The comments turned. The forum that had defended him went quiet. The grim music could not survive the receipt. He took the cut version down himself in the end, which is the closest thing to a confession a man like that ever offers. But the internet does not let you take a thing back. It only lets you confirm you have something to hide. By the week's end, the story everyone knew was the true one. That a man had brought screams and recordings and a bottle of fake blood to a quiet gate at midnight to manufacture a haunting, had thrown the blood on a KingsGuard who would not flinch, had laid hands on him to force a reaction the soldier refused to give, and had been arrested for it, and that the only presence at the Sallow Gate that night had been 2 sentries doing precisely, unbreakably, what they were posted to do. The case did not go to any great trial. With the lamp camera, the bystanders' footage, the streamer's own live stream in which he announced his intent in his own voice, and the bottle with its receipt, there was nothing to contest. He pleaded to the assault. He was bound over, fined, ordered to keep away from the Hartreeve court and from us, and made to face the small, unglamorous machinery of consequence that he had spent his career pretending did not apply to him. There was no checkbook that fixed it, no manager who could edit it, no audience whose number could outvote a magistrate. He had built his living on the idea that a guardsman is a prop with no power to answer, that you may do a thing to a man who is not allowed to react and walk away clean. The Sallow Gate taught him, quietly and lawfully and at his own hand, that he was wrong. Westmarsh got his coat cleaned. The post keeps a reserve tunic for exactly such nights, and the ruined one came back from the cleaners in a week, the red restored, and he wore it again on the same gate without a word, which is how we close such things, not with a speech, but by standing the next watch as though the last one had cost us nothing, because the standard does not get to cost us anything that shows. I asked Holloway once whether it troubled him, the bad midday hour when the lie was winning. He looked at me the way he looks at a young trooper who has learned a thing the hard way. The man wanted a reaction, he said. We're trained to deny him one. So we denied him one in the lane, and then we denied him one online. We just stood still and let the truth do the marching. That's the whole job, Quell. It always was. I think about that more than I expected to. We are not a haunting. We are not a costume or a prop or a measuring instrument for some other man's ghost. We are men who have agreed to hold a standard so that the standard does not depend on whether anyone is watching, or whether the night is kind, or whether the loudest version of a thing is the true one. The streamer came to the sallow gate certain that our stillness was a weakness he could exploit, that a man who is not allowed to react can be made to do anything. He left in the back of a constabulary car having proved the reverse, that the stillness is the strength, that the refusal to be provoked is not the absence of an answer but the answer itself, delivered slow, delivered lawful, delivered total. He has not been back. The lane is quiet again at midnight. The lamp still hisses on its bracket and throws its long yellow cone on the cobbles, and Westmarsh and I, when the rota puts us together, still stand the inner box of the sallow gate with our eyes front and the whole street red behind our faces. Sometimes, on a slow watch, a tourist will tell the old story that the north gate is haunted, that a guardsman died on these stones, that the place is cursed. I let them tell it. It is harmless, and it is not mine to correct. But I know what stood at that gate the night a man tried to make a ghost of us. It was not a presence, and it was not a flinch, and it was not anything that the dark holds. It was a young soldier in a stained red coat who did not move when a stranger seized him and hauled, who raised a shield and not a fist, and who let a foolish, frightened man defeat himself in front of every witness the night had quietly assembled. There is nothing supernatural in that. There never was. There is only this, which is older and harder and worth more than any haunting. A man who will not be moved, not by fear, not by an audience, not by a lie that runs faster than the truth, standing his post in the dark, holding the line for people who will never know his name, because that is what the coat is for. The stones at the sallow gate do not remember a ghost. They remember that.